Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Bull. This episode dealt with a boy named Jordan who basically was having a relationship with his teacher, Susan, and that basically his parents were super pissed about it. They were suing the teacher, rightfully so. She lost her job, she lost her teaching license, but she wasn't put in jail because of the circumstance of the relationship because they are two consenting adults. And I'm not sure. I think so. The show takes place in New York. Don't quote me on that because I could be completely wrong. But nevertheless, where they are, the age of consent is 17, so they're not in the wrong in that situation. Like I said, the whole circumstances go right off the bat tell you it's a very gray area. I mean, for some people, it's not gray at all. It's like, this is wrong, but there's also the other mentality of like, no, in the eyes of the law, it's not wrong, but from a moral standpoint, it is because it's like you're an adult and you took advantage of someone that you have power over, and no matter what it is, the situation where you think you're in love or not, you took advantage of. Like the best situation would have been, to wait until he was of consenting age, but wait until he was done with high school. That way, it's no longer an issue because there's no longer that power position because it's like he's beneath you, and you're the one that kind of has all the power in the relationship. Because that's actually it kind of coincides with Danny's situation. I thought that was like hilarious. I felt so bad for her because Danny's got this new guy that kind of works for her named Gabe. He kind of helps her, he takes photos and stuff like that. But there's a little bit of something between them too. And when hearing the psychologist break it down like that, talking about the fact is like, dating someone beneath you, kind of like having power over them, it got her thinking because it's like her and Gabe kind of have like a little bit of an age difference. Like I don't think she ever really went into details, but there's an age difference. Plus, she's kind of his boss, and there's feelings there, but it's kind of like, what if she's doing a power thing there? And it's like, it never really crossed her mind until that psychologist started talking. And she's like, her circumstances would between are very similar to Jordan and Susan's. Obviously, the difference being that Gabe is older. Gabe's in his 20s. Jordan's still a teenager. So even that small amount of years, it still makes a difference because where your brain is. Because the thing is, like, with his brain, but being as young as he is, it's kind of hard to be like, okay, like you're in the right, you're adult enough to really understand everything because, at that point, your brain is still developing. And there's that part of your brain that the brain guy was literally like, yeah, you literally have sex on the mind all the time, like because of that. And that's what drives him to do the things, doing everything. I mean, he did, because that's the thing about this whole circumstances, no matter how you felt about it morally and stuff like that, lawfully, it wasn't that big of an issue because they, in the eyes of the law, they didn't do anything wrong. But at the same time, it's like Jordan was giving up his scholarship, his football, and then it was a circumstance where it's like you saw Susan being very pushy in the sense of like, well, she's obviously the power in a relationship where it's just like, making Jordan give up football. The fact is that she was answering the questions for him. It's like, he's into art and stuff like that, which is, that could be the thing. Maybe he really is into art and everything too, because the question also comes up like, did his parents ever really listen to him? And it's like, it's a situation where his mom, like, was filling out his college forms because she knew he wouldn't do it. Like, it's like they kind of pushed him to go down a path that he went down. It's like, did they ever really take the time to ask him, did he like football? Did he even want to do this? He even want to go to college on a scholarship and stuff like that? They never really asked what he wanted. But at the end of the day, it's a situation where it's like parents, they don't always take the time to do that, but they do what they do out of love. It's because they love him and they care about his future and they want to see him go do great things. They want to see in his dad's position. He's like, I don't want my son to have it the way I did, the way other people have. I want him to be in a fortunate position that he can do whatever he wants to in his life. So, but, also moving in, I ended up finding out later on that Susan's actually pregnant. And it's like, is it Jordan's baby? Because if it is Jordan's baby, that proved that, she's 4 months. I was finding out, she's 4 months pregnant. But then it's like, then that means there's a case of statutory rape involved. But it's like, nope, Jeffrey is the baby father. Her, like, legitimately, Susan and Jordan did not get together until after he turned 17. Yes, there were some like feelings there, but they didn't act upon it. So once again, like I said, it's a gray area because it is the moral thing versus the lawful thing. So, I mean, especially when it breaks it down, like, because you had a situation because like she broke up her marriage, like the man that's deeply in love with her, though he has his own flaws because the fact is that he doesn't know what kind of worth he has on his own. It's like, he has his wife there, and it's like now that she's left him, he doesn't really 100% think that, oh, like it's worthy of, it has any worth now that she's no longer in his life. Because he was legitimately trying to get back with her. He's like, yo, let me talk to her. But then, like, Bull was kind of bringing up the question, like, what do you want to get back with her or not? And we never really got 100% an answer. I mean, we had that moment where he was just kind of like, hey, you know what? I'm going to get custody of this child. Like, you got trying to get some other man to raise my child. I mean, well, boy, to raise my child. That's not fair. It's like, I'm going to get full custody. But probably, like, the most, like heart-wrenching moment is like, and then later on in the episode when you have Bull talk, he sits down and he talks to Susan. He's like, you do realize that what you're doing is wrong, making her realize, like, he kind of looks at her circumstances. Like, I found out about your dad. Your dad didn't do anything bad. He wasn't abusive. He's actually a good person. He was an okay person. But the problem was the fact is that he got remarried and the focus got taken away from Susan. He brought up a term, balcony person. That basically this is a person that's always going to be in your corner. They're always going to be shouting for you, always rooting for you, always be in your corner. And that's what Jordan is for Susan. She never really had that much of her own life. And it's like to have that person who Jordan will go as far as saying he worships her. It's not just love. He worships Susan. And it's like she never really had that in her life. She never really got it from her husband. Like the thing is, like, nothing would ever be enough for Susan. That eventually down the road, no matter how circumstances, there was even a psychologist that was breaking it down, saying like 95% of relationships that are born out of infidelity bound to fail. And that's just with adults. It's like you have to think about circumstances even more so when you look at Jordan's situation, because he is so much younger. Because the thing is, it's like you're asking this young boy to give up on going to college, becoming, go to work at some, minimum wage job to take care of you and a child that's not even his own. And that's a lot to ask of a 17-year-old, no matter what the circumstances may be. In this particular circumstance, like obviously different circumstances, need different results, because it does depend on the circumstances. But this particular circumstance, that's a lot to ask for when it's not really love. You may feel like it's love, you may think it's love, but it's not. Kind of going back to it, it's like, because she lost a person that was kind of her balcony person, like Susan lost hers, that being her dad, because he became more focused on his new wife and her children, that Susan just kind of felt alone. And the reason why she latched on to Jordan so hard was because he showed her attention. Because he worshipped her. He was there always rooting beside her, made her feel essentially special. But it's like doing what you're doing, having him as your balcony person has cost him his balcony people, and that's his parents. And now without that support, eventually, like, what's to say what's going to happen to Jordan, later on down the road and everything. Because it's like once these circumstances happen, it's like, going back to psychologists, not a matter if this relationship falls apart, a matter of when it falls apart, Jordan will never be able to trust people again, because his trust in people will be destroyed. And it's like, you could argue probably will never have a healthy relationship going forward. So, but it was a circumstance where like, she realized the mistake that she made. It's just like she did care about him, but it was just kind of she was trying to fill something empty inside of her with someone else. And she realized it was wrong to do what she was doing, because she was, taking away from Jordan's life. I mean, it's like I said, going back to it, you're pushing so much responsibility on a younger person, and it's not right. So we ended up seeing at the end of it, Jordan obviously reconnects with his family and everything. Bull recommends a therapist, or psychiatrist for Susan. So we really don't know how the circumstances worked out between her and husband. I do hope it's a situation where she was able to get help, because like I said, it's a gray area. Like you could argue she took advantage of him, but it's also because, there was something wrong with her there, It's like, it's a situation where it's like, you almost want to feel bad, you almost want to be like, no, she's a pedophile, she took, but at the same time, it's like, there's so much more extenuating circumstances to the situation, so it's kind of like I said, it's a very great area that they presented in this episode. I'd almost completely forgotten this was the element of the episode until it started popping. I was like, right, that's what it was. And I was like, for some reason, I was thinking like, oh, is Bull going to represent them on their side? But I was like, oh, no. I was like, oh, he's representing the parents. I was like, oh, I guess because in my mind, I was like, oh, maybe he kind of because he does believe in true love, but he's like, this isn't, their relationship isn't. Because he was saying like, hey, we'll solve this whole situation the right way. And that right way is to get Jordan to realize, like, this isn't the right circumstances, that he needs to kind of go back and follow the path that he was on, reconnect with his family and stuff like that. And it's like I said, at the very least, I do hope that, Susan's getting the help she needs, that maybe things between her and her husband, maybe they can find some way to work around it. Because it's like, but that's the circumstances too, because even Bull said, like, even with her, with things as they are, Jeffrey wasn't enough. Her job as a teacher just wasn't enough. And it's like, eventually down the road, Jordan wouldn't have been either. Nothing would be enough to kind of fill that hole in her, There'd be kind of temporary fixes to it, sure, but no permanent, unless she gets the proper help she needs. So maybe that help will kind of help with that relationship. Certain things I liked. I do like the return of Liberty. This is the third case that Liberty's been on, so I really appreciate the fact that she's popping in and out. Because obviously everyone else that Bull's ever really worked with has kind of been like one-offs. But I mean, I'm sure maybe he'll cross paths with other people that he's come across in the past too, like other lawyers he's worked with, because of the fact is that, they are lawyers and they have different clients. But it looks like Liberty is constantly become, like I said, so far she's popped up 3 times. So maybe I brought that up, I think, in the first episode too, like what I'd like to see her pop up more, and she's done it. So I did like the way they pick the jury in this episode. It was like, oh, no. We're not going to ask any questions. Why not? It's like, basically, the people we're looking for is someone who will respect authority. And who has the most authority in the courtroom is like, under the circumstances when asking all these questions, it's like, oh yeah, Wendy and Liberty as the lawyers. And so it's like, get Wendy to kind of ask all these questions and push them into positions where it's kind of like, okay, we get to check them out ourselves. And it's like, depending on their responses to Wendy, that tells us whether or not they're a reliable person in this situation. I love it. And then like they're like, oh yeah, it's like, okay, at telling Liberty it's her time that she can, cross-examine the jury. And she's like, oh yeah, I have no questions. And then Wendy's like, you don't have any questions? She's like, no, I mean, no, ma'am. But the fact is, and it was more so than anything, the real reason for doing that in Bull's case was like to be like, oh yeah, it's like sprinkles on top, just kind of a little added bonus just to kind of piss her off a little bit. It never really came up, but it seemed like her and Bull kind of had a past, maybe like they've crossed paths before. I mean, maybe that's not the case. I don't know. But from what I was seeing, it just seemed like that might be the case, but maybe not. And another thing we kind of picked up in this episode, well, really quickly, since I'm on the subject of the jury, finding out that guy Edward was basically into BDSM. Like, it made him a wild card, because it's like, oh, obviously he could be saying this situation of like, oh yeah, this is wrong, oh, this is disgusting and everything, but on the inside, like, he gets off on the fact of being a kind of, I don't know how to really properly phrase it like the show did. It's kind of like doing the forbidden, essentially, kind of like the desire of kind of vicariously letting your own desires get loose. Essentially, kind of like in his particular circumstances, he kind of put on like, oh yeah, oh, this is wrong and disgusting, but on the inside, he's really feeling like, oh man, I wish I was in Jordan's shoe, or I'd have a teacher taking advantage of me type of situation. So, but the other thing I was alluding to is Chunk. We learned a little bit more about him. He kind of played a big part in this like case of just kind of being like, he came from a similar circumstance as Jordan in the sense of like, oh, he left football behind, but his family put everything into him getting to football. And just like when he was about to be drafted, literally the day of him about to be the draft, he quit. And at the beginning, he was just like, oh yeah, like the reason why he did it was just because he wanted to find something that felt more like him. Wanted to find something that fit him more better. It wasn't even just about the circumstances of coming out. It was more so just like, hey, he wanted to find something better. But then Bull asked him later on, and he kind of admits the real reason was because he wanted a new challenge. He got tired of the rush of like, oh yeah, scoring a touchdown and everything. It was fine and dandy, but he grew tired of it. The constant injuries and stuff like that. He wanted a new challenge, something to kind of push himself. And that's something he regretted, is the fact that he was never able to tell the people in his life. That's the reason why he quit football. And in particular, his mom, because his mom for him was his balcony person. She was there behind him wholeheartedly. But she, obviously, in the way they talk about it, it seems like she's no longer around. So he never had an opportunity to really tell her the truth of why he did what he did. So, which is a circumstance that's kind of like, you know, you can respect that. The fact is, he just wanted a new challenge in life. He didn't want to be in this comfort zone of like, oh, this is where it should be. It's like you can look at it as like he grew bored of it, but I guess he didn't have the heart to tell his mom because it's like she was always in his corner, following him, believing him. It's kind of circumstances with Jordan and his parents. They were wholeheartedly believing it's like, oh, he's so good at this, what this means for him. They never really took the opportunity to ask, what did he want? But now with the circumstances playing out the way they have, like that probably will be a question that comes up. It's like, do you want to do art? Do you want to continue doing football? It's like this time we'll ask you, what do you want to do with your life? Because Bull also told him like, okay, I know it sucks now with this whole circumstances, but the fact is you will feel this feeling again. And it'll be for the right circumstances with the right person. He's like, oh, I'm talking from personal experience. So I don't think he meant necessarily, I mean, maybe he did, but I doubt it meant like a situation where it's like, oh, he's been in that exact situation Jordan's been in. But probably like you take the Isabella situation where it's like, finding that person that you thought was right for you, but it turns out not to be the case. So maybe Bull still, in his own way being like, yeah, maybe he did find that person. Maybe Isabella was that person for him. Like she was kind of like that right person after one or two or however many previous people that just weren't right, not just for him, but, he not just like, oh, they weren't right for him, but maybe he just also wasn't right for them, those circumstances. So, and then finally at the end, we had the whole Danny and Gabe thing. It seems like they're doing well. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in the future. Like I said, you do see them circumstances. That's obviously the parallel that was created because it's like, it's kind of a circumstances of like, should you be like dating someone that you work with, especially when that person isn't, like if you're in the same position wise, it kind of makes sense. But at the same time, it's like, kind of the whole power situation, dating below someone so you can have power over them and kind of just, possibly fix some issues within yourself. And the moment Danny heard that, she was kind of like almost shaking. She was like almost crossing her arms and shaking her head like, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. What? No. Once again, kind of a reason why I'm like, hey, I want to learn a little bit more about everyone. But like I said, little but surely we're learning more about everyone. Marissa, we learned a little bit more about Chunk. We've learned a little bit about Benny. Now a little bit about Danny. It's kind of creeping forward a little bit. Still need a little bit more about her and Cable, and we'll have the whole team figured out. I mean, because we've even been trailing, obviously, in Bull's past. So, and it seems like he's not necessarily the biggest person to really talk about his past. So, but overall, a very good episode. But that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.